If you're ready to learn how technology is driving business innovation in Cincinnati and beyond, you're tuned in to the right podcast. Join us for interviews and discussions with business leaders, innovators, and visionaries. With our host, Sam Schutte, CEO of Unstoppable Software. This is Unstoppable Talk.
All right, so this is our very first episode of Unstoppable Talk, where we're going to discuss driving innovation using technology in Cincinnati and beyond. For this first episode, we thought we would get together and just talk a little bit about what it's like to be a professional software developer out there in the world, and our backgrounds and how we arrived at it, and all that kind of stuff. So I have with me here on the podcast Scott Harrison, who's out in Colorado Springs, who's one of our senior developers, and also Nate Stuller, who is here in Cincinnati and is also one of our senior developers.
Hi there.
Hello.
So, guys, I thought we would just talk a little bit about, kick this initial podcast off a little bit, just talking about, like I said, who we are and our backgrounds. Our plan is for this podcast to bring people in for interviews that are doing cool things out there in their business or in their businesses with technology, and really doing a lot of innovative stuff. Some of them projects we work on, some of them companies are doing internally, or startups people are doing, unique services people are providing. But really for folks to get a context about any of those conversations we have, thought it'd be good, like I said, to talk about sort of our background. So I just came up with a series of questions that we pulled off Quora here that are the most common questions that people ask about software development as a profession. And hopefully there's new or young software developers out there, or people who want to become software developers out there who might listen to this and gain something from it. So, first question everybody wants to know is, how did you become a software developer? Nate, you want to start off?
Yeah. So this is Nathan Stuller. Yeah, my journey probably started just growing up being pretty good at math, and in high school getting started with a TI-81 graphing calculator, where my uncle gave me a program that I had to hand type in to determine the answer for the quadratic formula. And just going through that and entering all the steps, it just started to make sense, and also sparked an interest in looking up in the manual, what do these commands mean? And from there, that just turned into many more programs that went on to that calculator. And then after that, went into computer science degree at the Ohio State University and entry-level jobs. And after that, and just going forward and working on the career after that.
Now, is the Ohio State University the official name, or do you have to say "the" in front of
Absolutely.
it? Absolutely. Okay, I wasn't sure. People do.
Point of pride, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Because there's like others otherwise, I suppose.
No, it's just the university, effectively.
Okay, gotcha. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, this is Scott Harrison out in Colorado Springs, and from before I can remember, I've always been interested in automation, artificial automation, robots and that kind of thing. And, watching movies where there was a mad scientist who had his entire home automated. And I don't know, the guy on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, how he just pulled things together and made them work. And that's always been, but really got me interested in. I had a conversation with a guy who worked for IBM in the 70s, and we were talking about the innovation of the microchip and miniaturization of transistors, and he was trying to explain it to me. And that's, I think, when I really got interested in it. Then went into accounting in college and hated it, and then got away from it and started going into programming. My first language was COBOL, and I learned everything I could about COBOL, and never quite used it when I got out of college.
Guess you were lucky.
Yeah, just went right into, the first thing is that someone asked me if I could program this PC computer. And I said, what's on there? And said, DBase 2. So I learned DBase 2, and that was the beginning of it. And it's all history from there. Went from DBase 2 to C, to C Sharp, to pretty much stayed on the Microsoft platform ever since then. But my interest has always been, how can I make this work better? And just the organization of information has always piqued my interest.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I've worked with you guys for a long time. I mean, Nate, almost 10 years, and Scott for almost 8 years, I think, in November. And I don't think I've ever heard either of those background stories exactly. So it's like, how did we miss that? I guess I should have asked that in the interview. I don't know. So, something I've done a lot recently in the last 4 or 5 years is meet with, like I said, young students that are maybe freshmen in college or something like that. And they're always asking this question of me, which is the next question, which is, what's your best piece of advice for someone who wants to become a software developer?
Yeah, to me, it's all about picking a project that you're interested in and actually doing it, because you can't just learn all the theory. You kind of can in a university setting, but even that, in a lot of ways, doesn't actually prepare you for doing the job. So that's always my first general advice is, what is something you want to do with it? And if you have that idea, then you can start applying your learning. And then we could go into a whole other list of things to do to try and learn.
Yeah. So find a project that you can kind of pour yourself into rather than just reading manuals or something. Actually find something to actually solve, a problem to solve or something to work on. Cool.
Exactly.
How about you, Scott?
If you want to become a software developer, pick something, like C Sharp, just learn as much as you can about it. And if you have access to college courses, that's really good. And if you have access to Udemy, Udemy is a really good source for some really good teaching for beginners, just to get started. Learn as much as you can. And like Nate was saying, take on a project. You just jump in and start doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get advice, programming reviews, code reviews from people who've been in the industry for a while, and say, how does this look? Is this right? Is this the style? And make friends with experienced developers. And the biggest thing is always push yourself to that next level. Just keep pushing the edge of the envelope. And when you think you're sick and tired and you said, this is not for me, just wait for the next day. Everything's going to be different. And those are the things I experienced over and over and over in my career, is that, things become so complex. You just sleep on it and you can see the light again. It all comes clear at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good note about Udemy too, because something I've often found is when I identify that project or something I want to do in an area that I don't know that much about, I have a general grasp of what I need to know. So I'll look at Udemy, I'll look at a few different sources, Coursera or a couple other things like that, at lynda.com. And there's many more, but those are some of the bigger ones. And just check it out with my couple keyword search items on what the technology is, and see which one seems like it's the most applicable to what I want to learn, and then go through it right there. And a lot of times those things are very aligned with what you're trying to do, and it can be very helpful. Like, for example, the first time I had to integrate Stripe into a website, lynda.com, I think was the one, or no, that one was Pluralsight. That's another example. So that one had a perfect course that was like exactly what I wanted to do with Stripe. And there you go. I go through that. It's almost step by step at that point. And granted, I had a lot more experience where it was easier to take the lessons that they were showing me and apply them. But I just find that usually between some of the top 5 course vendors out there, there's usually something that's pretty applicable.
Yeah, something I wanted to add to it too is when you're just starting out, don't try to be all things to all people. You don't have to know everything. Pick a language like, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and become the best you can at that. And maybe WordPress, jump into WordPress and become the best you can at that. And those are good places to start. And then once you've somewhat mastered that and become and become fluent in those languages and be able to write an application, put it out there for people to use, then start branching out, go to the next language, then go to the next language. And because there's no one person in this world that knows everything. There's no way. And stay on a platform until you become really good at it.
Yeah. One thing I've always told high school kids, seniors in high school or young college folks is like, along the lines of, getting hands-on experience in the project is like, do everything you can to get some kind of internship. It doesn't matter if it pays less, if it's working in the library at school and write a program while you're there, or just say, hey, I'll, go to some local nonprofit and say, hey, I'll build you a database, whatever it takes, because, I think that was what made a huge difference for me getting out into the field, is that I was lucky enough to have some really great internships at maybe 2 or 3 different companies while I was in college, after high school and through college, that I came out and said, look, I've got experience with Java, and at that time, nobody had experience with Java. And, a lot of my friends who just sort of worked as a lifeguard or in a restaurant or something like that, because it was, maybe they couldn't find anything else or whatever the reason was, I think that slowed them down. So I just think getting, real world experience as soon as possible, even if you do it for free, is better than nothing.
Completely agreed.
That's always my...
Yeah, even a computer science degree doesn't guarantee you a entry-level job in programming right out of school. So it didn't for me.
Yep. Well, that kind of brings me a little bit, totally. And that kind of brings me a little bit to next question, which, you see a lot of these boot camp type programs out there, and there's a lot of them that are really popular nowadays that, they promise you come in for 90 days and you learn to be a software developer. I think there's upside to those because, like we said, you're getting practical hands-on experience. But at the same time, I've talked to a lot of folks that come out of those and they're not really any better off. It does, it didn't end up in them getting a job, right? So there's that gap of, it's like, if you work for 2 or 3 summers in an internship, that's enough experience to land a job. But if you have 2 months experience in one of those sort of accelerator programs or whatever you want to call them type thing, it seems like it's almost not enough out there in the market, And I guess the question is how do you kind of plan your career from starting out as a software developer to become a senior or lead software developer, sort of like as you guys are? Are those sort of accelerators a good way to go about that? I mean, those didn't really exist sort of 15 years ago when we were starting out, right? Or whatever, 25 years ago.
I view the boot camps as more of a kickstart to the entry level career. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so yeah, we're not really saying for someone who's already in a programming career and then takes one of those boot camp courses and then,
exactly. I'm saying people starting out, because I mean, the way it's advertised is you come for 90 days and then you graduate and boom, you're a software developer magically. I don't know if that actually works, is my opinion.
I'm cynical about them in the sense that I feel like you're going to get out of it what you put into it. It's pretty much going back to the same piece of advice. If you have something that you can apply what you learned to and you can demonstrate that you learned it after the fact, then you're going to learn more and you're going to have something that you can actually demonstrate. And it goes also along with what you're saying about how you need something that you can show basically on your resume that you actually know how to program in a real world environment, because the academic pursuits of it are much different than what it actually happens when you're trying to code
Oh
and
yeah,
actually
that's definitely
produce
true.
something and produce software for users.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
because
thinking the same way on that, on the boot camps, and they're just another tool, like any like an online class or a 90-day immersion. 90 days is a long time though for something like that, but coupling that with an internship is probably a really, really good way to go.
I mean, I think to some degree, a better avenue if you get out with a computer science degree or even just any kind of IT degree, and you're finding that you can't get a position writing code. It's, you could take a position in QA or in any kind of support around the software. I mean, I've worked at startups in the past that said, basically your first 90 days on the job, you were a QA person because they wanted you to learn, their code base by debugging. And they're like, you don't get to write new code yet. So, I mean, I think that can
Another
be a way
way
to do it.
another way in is business analyst,
Sure.
and they're always looking for good business analysts.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because in college I took, of the maybe whatever 20 some courses in computer science, there was one that was like system design, architecture, and it was writing requirements, right? And I think, but in the real world, that's probably been at least 60% of my time is dealing with like requirements and scope and project plans. Maybe not 60%, but certainly a big chunk of time out of, all the times. But, depending where you're at. I mean, if you're at a place that has a lot of meetings or is a really complex system or something, it seems like it's not 1/20th of your time you got to worry about requirements. And that's sort of a little bit of that real world versus academic stuff too, because the academic projects didn't even really have requirements most of the time.
Yeah, that leads in a bit to what I would answer as how to become a senior software developer, because if you're thinking about business and analysis and gathering requirements, that is a little more of a soft skill, but it's thinking about how the software will actually be used and what the user needs out of it. Whereas an entry-level programmer may just be writing code that fulfills those requirements in the most isolated and technical way and without actually thinking about the big picture. So going forward, you start thinking more and more about the software engineering aspects, which is how do all these requirements fit into the whole release cycle of the software, as well as the project management, like what are some other resources that might be working on this, what has to happen first. To me, that's where that junior developer becomes more of a senior one. It's a little bit also they're growing their technical skills, but I think it's more seeing the big picture with those other soft skills.
Yeah. Well, and I think, on the topic of soft skills, because I've known folks who were just absolutely incredible code writers, but had no communication skills. And then folks who really understood, why a business was building something and could sort of sit on the fence a bit between business and technology. And usually those folks went farther in terms of getting promoted or getting more responsibility. Because usually the folks that are like just amazing at just super, super genius code writers, you can't afford to take them off of writing code to do anything. You want them to just pound away at the keyboard and that's it. And so I think to some degree, depending on the way that you interpret the title senior developer, whether it's lead developer or architect or department head or whatever, usually, at least in most companies, I don't know that that's necessarily always the quote unquote best coder. I think a lot of times that's a person who has better soft skills or at least is a mix 50-50 of technical and soft skills, just like any profession, probably.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, more to what Nate was saying about discipline, good strong work ethic and self confidence. I think are good at building a career. Just the discipline to stay with it. You know, Just keeping at it every day. Strong work ethic, self-confidence, good communication skills are really good soft skills to have when learning, because a lot of these things you're working autonomously, you probably won't be having a lot of guidance from a team lead or from someone with expertise in the field.
Yeah, I agree. And I wanted to go back for maybe our last question. Our theme for this podcast overall is talking about innovation, right? And so when you all look out at, the software companies, the big software companies out in the field today, out in the industry, who do you think, or who in your opinion is really doing some of the most innovative things when it comes to software tools or sort of driving platforms? What are you kind of seeing out there that if you look at the things that's, the platforms and the tools that folks might want to really get into that are going to be, say maybe 3 years from now, really be the thing that everybody's talking about? Who do you think what companies are really kind of driving that innovation in the industry?
Well, I'll choose to answer it the way I want to, which is not so much what's 3 or 4 years out that everybody's going to be talking about, but I'm thinking it's Amazon. And just, I'm so impressed with Alexa that it's like this black box little container that mostly just works. And it's basically it's still the leader in that audio recognition and just being our personal assistant. And that's just going to become more and more involved in our life. And then when you throw in that all the scope of the things that they do, like having their AWS, their server platforms and everything for that, it's just, there's so much going on that they're innovating all over the place.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I haven't talked to you guys about this, but I'm working on setting up a relationship with a company that builds voice recognition, sort of data management profiles for Alexa. That would be a product that we could bring into some of our clients, but basically like a way to use Alexa to access your business data, anything from mainframe data to manufacturing data, healthcare data, the type of stuff that we're always building, using Alexa to access that. And it's pretty incredible how good it is. Like, I saw they were in here in the office last week giving me a demo on Friday. This company was, I mean, it can understand such incredibly complex questions and then basically tell you the answer to your question about a KPI or something like that you need to know for your manufacturing line. It's pretty incredible. But what do you think, Scott, on that question of who's driving innovation?
Well, what I'm looking at specifically this week is Microsoft's Blazor. It's just the next step in application development. And the biggest takeaway from that is what I've learned so far is that they're hiding the complexities of the asynchronous communications between the client and the server, and just making that easier and less complex to program, so you're not so busy doing that kind of work and you're spending more time on the problem you're trying to solve. I think Microsoft has always been with developer tools just right there. I've always been very satisfied with them, and I haven't really looked elsewhere for other software development tools.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's all we had for this podcast, and thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Scott and Nate, for your opinions and feedback and insights into what you all have done in your career and what you kind of see coming up. And we'll look forward to talking with you all more in the future.
All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to Unstoppable Talk. We hope you enjoyed today's podcast. If you did, be sure to support the show by leaving a 5-star review on iTunes. And learn more about this show by heading over to unstoppablesoftware.com. Until next time, keep innovating.